Yeah, so I'm dividing this part of the retrospective into 4 videos, one for each season, and the movies. I didn't want to do it, but at the rate I was going, plus with all the personal life bullshit going on right now, if I didn't, there was a non-zero chance I wouldn't have uploaded again this year. I didn't want that to happen. So, we're getting this. It's not a perfect solution, but it's something. So, let's just go. So there's an interesting little wrinkle that comes in the form of the show's opening title sequence that I can now properly contextualize now that we're moving on to Season 2. There are 2 noticeable changes to the opening title sequence between the seasons. In the Season 1 intro, you'll see Phineas sitting under the tree looking completely emotionless like he's zoned out or some shit. And then in the backdrop, at the end of the sequence, you'll notice the images come directly from the original pilot pitch. In Seasons 2 and beyond, they finally let Phineas smile while he's sitting under that damn tree, and the passing by images are all lifted from Season 1 episodes. And this trend would continue with each subsequent season, with the intro taking images from episodes that took place in the previous season for the backdrop. Does any of this actually affect anything? No, not at all, I just find it interesting. With Season 1, there's definitely a sense that they were really trying to just get their bearings. Get the characters to their personalities so they could be further fleshed out, get the timing down on their jokes, tighten the pace of their stories. Season 2 is where I really feel it starts to come together in that department. It also helps that the episode ideas themselves start to get a little more ambitious in Season 2, especially with their extended episodes, which we will get to. And speaking of the double-length episodes, Season 2 happens to open with one. The episode The Lake-Nosed Monster, to be precise, where Phineas and Ferb go off in search of the long-sought-after Lake-Nosed Monster. Candace becomes a lifeguard at the resort alongside Jeremy, and Doof seeks to remove all of the zinc from the water at the Lake-Nosed Water Resort because...
Space is warped and time is bendable.
Hell if I know, he went on an unprompted, unhinged rant about genies in the middle of the episode for literally no reason. I don't know. This is actually a pretty solid episode all around, even though the story doesn't really go balls to the wall big like later episodes do. All 3 stories are still pretty solid and pretty damn funny in their own right. Something that I appreciate when shows do is when they'll take little details that are introduced in an episode and reincorporate them into future episodes. And I'm not referring to like story-based, serialized stories because that's kind of the norm. More like episodic shows like Phineas and Ferb. In this case, I'm talking about a character that's reused later on in the show. Candace's boss in this episode, Captain Bob Weber, who's voiced by John Larroquette, reappears later on this season in the episode Candace's Big Day, when he gets married to the boys' Aunt Tiana. Which is a shame because this means someone on the crew actually liked him. And if that's not enough, there's also this.
I wrote big laundry. I don't even remember what the reason was. So I guess I assumed I'd remember.
4 to 6 days later.
Well, this is what I meant. I am nefariously planning to provide the entire population of the tri-state area with free laundry.
They really could have just left it at the gag presented and the end credits for the Lake-Nosed Monster, but no, they decided to go the extra mile with this joke, and I am forever grateful for it. We'll come back to the longer episodes of the season a little bit later in this video. Right now, I'd like to just focus on the 11-minute episodes, because even those have some really intriguing plots and stories and jokes that I really found myself engrossed with. One of the standouts for me, as I mentioned in the first part of this massive retrospective, is Suddenly Susie, where we learn that Susie's predisposition to hate Candace because she wants Jeremy's attention is all really an act designed specifically to control Jeremy to her whim. It's kind of impressive to me just how that little chunk of development for Susie adds so many new layers of character to what's already there. And it was never really necessary either. They could have just done a generic plot about Candace trying not to let Susie embarrass her all day, and it probably would have been funny, but they went the extra mile. Also, it features Perry wearing a trucker hat, so that automatically makes it a 12 out of 10 episode. Oh, and speaking of Perry, let's talk about Oh There You Are, Perry. I don't think it gets talked about nearly enough just how fragile Perry's status with his host family actually is. In this episode, he finds out that because of a new thread called... the regurgitator.
We keep pushing him down, but he keeps coming back up.
Brother, this guy stinks!
Never change, Carl. Never change. Anyway, because of the emergence of this new threat, Doofenshmirtz is no longer considered a legitimate threat by Alka, which only serves to raise the legitimately concerning implication that he ever was considered an actual threat, which ultimately means that Perry has to be pulled away from his host family and relocated to a new family. So yeah, Perry is 3-way straight up fucked when it comes to actually getting to stay with the Flynn Fletcher family. His life can be completely uprooted at any time for pretty much any reason, and that's kind kinda fucking scary. What makes it worse is that because Candace had left Perry outside for the night the prior night because of a temper tantrum, she now blames herself for Perry being gone. And to be fair, it's not really unjustified. Sure, the Alka thing is completely foreign to her, but she didn't have to be such a dick to him, though it really did help set the stage for Candace's feelings of guilt throughout the episode. And yes, the ending song, Come Home Perry, is absolutely wonderful.
Come home, Perry. Come home, Perry. Come home.
I'd love to play more snippets of these wonderful songs for you, but do you trust YouTube's automated copyright system to not go on a drunken rampage? I don't. Also, I should point out that the regurgitator, oh god, is voiced by Clancy Brown, who, as we discussed last time, was also the voice of that stupid truant officer jackass from Phineas and Ferb Get Busted. If I'm being perfectly brutally honest, I think the truant officer is his better performance of these two characters, but I don't give a shit because I refuse to watch that episode. I protest. I think far and away one of this episode's best features is just how well it demonstrates how essential Perry is to the nucleus of the show. And I firmly stand by that Perry is the most important character in this entire show. He's not my favorite character, but I believe he's the most important character. Just look how much his absence completely fucked up everything about the formula of this show. Not to mention, he's just a really damn good pet for someone that doesn't do anything. Also, I have another question about Alka's purpose. So at the end of the episode, it's shown that the regurgitator actually ended up in prison.
Congratulations, Agent P. You defeated the regurgitator. As a matter of fact, he just landed in our prison.
Which allows Perry to return to the Flynn Fletchers as his host family, and allows him to return to Doofenshmirtz as his nemesis. But what would happen if he were ever released from prison? Wouldn't Perry just have to go back and do all of this all over again? I mean, the whole reason Perry was reassigned in the first place was because the regurgitator was seen as a threat, while Doofenshmirtz wasn't seen as a threat. But what, the regurgitator being in prison now means Doofenshmirtz suddenly gets elevated all over again? But Perry didn't even intentionally put the regurgitator in prison. He happened to land there by chance. Also, who was the regurgitator's nemesis before Perry was reassigned to him? And what actually happened to them? Are they dead?
Just raises too many questions.
See, to me it's hilarious when I go back and rewatch this series and come up with all these hilarious questions that the show ends up raising without realizing it. It's fun to think about because these questions, for the most part, don't really actually matter for the lore of the show. They're just really entertaining. That being said, the regurgitator really isn't all that interesting or funny of a character, so I'm not sorry that he didn't come back. Oh wait, no. Season 2 would also continue the storyline of Candace's burgeoning crush on Jeremy, such as the episode Backyard Aquarium, where Candace and Jeremy both conveniently forget how to use a fucking phone. You dial their number using the number pad and then you speak into the speaker part of the phone, whatever the hell it's called. It's not that difficult, guys, not even for 2009. Then there's Interview with the Platypus, where Candace gets to spend the entire day with Jeremy at his house, until Susie's little poodle pees on her leg and forces her to go back home, where she proceeds to get chased all around Danville by the animals she inadvertently insults when she returns home. I normally feel sorry for her, but in this case,
You had this coming!
Then there's At the Car Wash, where Stacy, in her infinite romantic wisdom, tells Candace she needs to play, quote, hard to get with Jeremy. I mean, everyone knows the most attractive quality about a romantic partner is apathy. Then there's the episode The Balgitos. While Baljeet is busy having an adolescent life crisis, Candace spends the episode trying to get Jeremy to give her a pet name, because she randomly decides to make that the conflict of their relationship in this episode. And I'm serious too, it just happens randomly.
Wait a minute, I just thought of something. Jeremy's never given me a nickname. I refer you to the chart.
Oh goody, the chart.
Well, the chart says...
Yes, Candace is upset because Jeremy hasn't yet given her a pet name, which is apparently something he's supposed to do when he made her his girlfriend, despite the fact that they're not technically dating yet at this point in the show. I don't know what's funnier, that or the reasoning Jeremy gives for not giving her a pet name.
I call you Candace, but not because I don't care enough to come up with a cute nickname for you. I call you Candace because I happen to really like that name.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Okay, look, I have nothing against Jeremy. He's a perfectly fine character. I like him with Candace, but let's be honest, he's about as uncreative as he is bland. Demonstrably so.
Just call me Candace Flynn.
And honestly, Jeremy's reluctance to use that as a nickname for Candace makes no sense, because that's fucking brilliant. Seriously, how does she have more creativity than you? Well, then again, her brothers are Phineas and Ferb, so that does make sense. Strangely enough, I think my favorite episode to feature the Candace-Jeremy dynamic in Season 2 is Cheer Up Candace. Candace becomes depressed after Jeremy cancels a date, and so her brothers try to cheer her up throughout the day. It's definitely the most relatable episode, I think. It really did a good job of helping me sympathize with Candace's plight. Also, the Mix and Mingle Machine song low-key kinda slaps. And as it turned out, Jeremy didn't cancel the date for nothing.
I didn't want to break our date. I just wanted to earn some extra money so I could surprise you.
That surprise being a carriage ride throughout the park. And this is where the show's theme of having each episode take place during a certain day and only during that day unintentionally kind of blows up in its face. So what are wages like in Danville? Because the implication unintentionally becomes Jeremy only needed that one extra shift to afford this carriage ride. What did he make doing this ice cream shift? What does he make as a slushy burger worker? Is inflation just not a thing? Oh, there was also Spa Day where Candace freaked out over looking shallow in front of Jeremy. You know, she and Stacy were going on a spa trip while Jeremy was busy building homes for the homeless, I guess. It was a legitimate concern, even if Candace went about it completely wrong. Although Jeremy's part of the story never really gets any resolution, so. This will they, won't they arc of theirs ends up culminating in the episode Summer Belongs to You, where they finally get together and Jeremy proclaims her officially as his girlfriend, even cementing it with a kiss in the final few minutes of the episode. And they end up staying a couple throughout the end of the series, which I greatly appreciate. There was never a need for them to go through any sort of breakup or turmoil arc. Jeremy clearly accepts her for her and all of her paranoid faults. Which is why I fucking hated that fake out they tried to pull in Season 3, but we'll get to that in Season 3. Speaking of relationship arcs, another one that we see a little more in Season 2 is Ferb and Vanessa's quote-unquote relationship. The idea of Ferb's massive crush on Vanessa is introduced in Season 1, specifically the episode I Scream, You Scream, but then they don't do anything with it until Season 2, specifically the episode Vanessa-Sary Roughness. Is that a double entendre? Basically, Vanessa is desperate to prove to her dad that she's responsible enough to own a car. To do this, she agrees to help him find this device thing, whatever, to help him with his new inator. And she's determined to do it all by herself to prove her responsibility, despite Ferb's repeated attempts to... Well, you know, it's actually kind of clever when I look back on this episode. He assists her in her quest to get this device, but he assists her doing her thing. At no point does he ever actually, you know, interfere and take over the mission. He's on standby, but ready to help her with her objectives, not whatever objectives he may have. He's not a simp, is what I'm saying. And I think that Vanessa truly was touched by Ferb's actions, and she was very grateful he allowed her to succeed or fail on her own terms. That meant something to her. Or at least that's what I tell myself. Otherwise, it's just really funny that she randomly remembers him in Summer Belongs to You. Yeah, and before we go any further, I feel like now is probably the best time to address the whole situation. So it's established that Phineas Ferb and their friends are about elementary school age, like between 8 and 11, somewhere in there, except for Baljeet, who seems to be younger. Vanessa, as of the episode Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together, is canonically 16 years old. In the episode Act Your Age, the one that jumps ahead several years in the future when Phineas and Ferb are teenagers, and thus Vanessa is a young adult woman, Ferb and Vanessa are in a romantic relationship. I want to state for the record that I personally do not believe that there was any ill intention with how Ferb and Vanessa's relationship was developed throughout the show. I mean, for one, there's barely any interaction between the two of them after Season 2. Vanessa is seen happily in a relationship with Monty from Season 3 onward, and Ferb doesn't really seem worse off for it. She's doing her thing, he's doing his thing, and it's not completely unreasonable to think that they would just find their way back to each other later on in life when they're both much older. This is not grooming, folks, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. It's not. That being said, remember Dipper's crush on Wendy in Gravity Falls? How there was a bit of a stink about the age difference? And to be fair, it wasn't necessarily wrong. But this is only a 3-year difference compared to Ferb and Vanessa, where the age difference is at least 8 years, if not more. It doesn't help that Dan Povenmire apparently doesn't see an issue with him being a 19-year-old teenage boy dating a 27-year-old woman at one point. I don't want to imply anything bad when it's not really justified, but that is a little bit of a red flag. That doesn't even take into account that I would prefer Vanessa and Monty anyway. I liked their chemistry better. or Vanessa and Candace together. I'm really not that picky. But despite whatever my feelings are about them as a couple, I do think that their on-screen time together in Season 2 was, for the most part, pretty well handled. I just wish they had more of it. They're a pretty fun dynamic that deserved a lot more exploration than what we actually got. Maybe the revival episodes will give us that, although I'm actually not too optimistic that that'll be the case. And then there's Phineas and Isabella's relationship, which I guess gets a lot of development in Season 2. I guess. I'm just gonna be frank about this. This is a bit of a hard subject for me to revisit because rewatching the show, this dynamic really hasn't aged for me that well. I guess I've just come to realize that I don't really like it, where one half of the relationship has this unsubtle, gargantuan crush on their partner, but for one reason or another, they're either too oblivious or too stupid to see the signs that are right in front of them. The truth is I was never really a fan of it when the show was first airing, and I like it even less now. Actually, to be fair, it might be more accurate for me to say, I hate when that's all that's going for this relationship. Now, it would be grossly unfair of me to say that this is all that there is to Isabella and Phineas's relationship, because that's clearly not the case. There is an aura of sincerity to their relationship, even though Phineas is too much of an egghead to realize that Isabella is massively in love with him, and also has bizarre fantasies about him.
Now all we have to do is run away together.
Why is Centaur? Is this supposed to be a metaphor for how Phineas is kind of a horse's ass about the romance thing? Yes, he is. Fight me. And Isabella is, at least at the beginning, far too stubborn to actually keep her expectations of romance in check. They still bounce off each other incredibly well. Like, I had no issue buying that eventually these two could be a very strong couple. They absolutely come off as two people that would literally die for the other person. I guess my primary issue is I just don't see this kind of gag as funny anymore. It wasn't really an issue for me in Season 1, mainly because it showcased that Isabella wasn't really actively bothered by Phineas not picking up on her hints. This is in spite of the fact that in Act Your Age, it had been established that at this point in the timeline, Isabella had been crushing on Phineas for years, and yet he still hadn't picked up on anything. Really, the only episode in Season 1 where this had been portrayed as an issue was the episode Out to Launch, where she was trying to ask Phineas to that girl's choice dance, only for Phineas to say yes at the end, while also tagging Ferb along as the third wheel. But that's not really overly egregious, and that worked a lot better as a punchline. This dynamic became a little more obnoxious in Season 3 and especially Season 4, but Season 2 was definitely where we started to see hints that it would be a real problem. At least for me. One of the big examples in Season 2 is the episode The Chronicles of Meep. Meep! To track down their new alien friend Meep, who literally crashes into their backyard, Phineas builds a cuteness tracker in order to track him down, and goes on and on pretty much most of the beginning of the episode about how adorable Meep is. Well, basically not acknowledging Isabella's own cuteness, which, as we would learn later on in the series, is literally unparalleled. Okay, but here's the funny part. It turns out later on in the episode, the twist ending is that Phineas had already pre-programmed the cuteness tracker to not account for Isabella.
I took into account your cuteness and adjusted the cute meter settings accordingly from the beginning.
No, I don't buy it for 1 minute.
And apparently her cuteness is just so overwhelmingly powerful that it literally breaks the machine. So on the one hand, point Phineas. On the other, what?
I second that. What?
Yeah, so even though this part of their quote-unquote relationship is really annoying, I kind of give it a pass because at least this was a punchline and at least it was funny. No joke, I legit did not see this coming when I first watched the episode. Also, just watching Isabella have to mentally eat some crow is actually pretty hilarious. But then there's the big episode where their relationship really... it starts to shake for me, and that's with Summer Belongs to You. So while Phineas and Ferb and their friends are all engaging in this day-long trip around the world following the sun, yada yada, they get stuck in Paris, and they need to collect some parts in order to get themselves back in the air. Isabella, in apparently her not-so-infinite wisdom, decided this would be the perfect opportunity to make a romantic move on Phineas, and then has the nerve to get pissy at him later on when he doesn't notice it, despite the fact that his priorities in this moment are clearly in the right place. Yeah, so I know for a fact that I have matured as a person, because when I originally watched this, I thought Phineas was 100% the bad guy. I used to think, what are you doing, man? Here is this girl literally flashing neon signs in front of you. But now I'm almost 30 at the time of this recording, probably 30 by the time I actually post it, and whatever screws I had loose when I was watching this for the first time have clearly gone back in their right place, because now I can confidently say, in this particular episode, Isabella You're a fucking idiot! Never mind the fact that they're trying to win a bet against Buford, which is a thing about this episode that I don't like, but I'll talk about it when I talk about it proper. But there was a non-zero chance that they wouldn't have been able to get back to Danville at all. Never mind the fact that Phineas actually recognized Ferb's crush on Vanessa, which is a whole nother thing. His priorities were exactly where they needed to be, and yet she was angry at him throughout the second half of the episode, even culminating in her crying on the stranded island in the final act.
You're in Paris, the most romantic city in the world, and you didn't even notice me.
Lady, you are the epitome of white privilege in this episode, and you're not even white. How did you do that? And yet she'll let herself fall back into his good graces with a simple hug, only to allow her heart to get broken repeatedly over the next 10 years because she doesn't know how to speak openly. Yeah, I've soured on the Isabella-Phineas interactions in this particular episode quite a bit over the years. I went from thinking that Phineas was 100% absolutely in the wrong to thinking that Isabella was 100% absolutely in the wrong, and now I'm kind of sort of in the middle. They're both wrong, but Isabella especially needs to be called out more. This ultimately plays into bigger problems that I feel the relationship has that I'll be happy to go over as we move on to seasons 3 and 4, because it's a lot more prominent there, especially season 4. Phineas and Isabella is my favorite quote-unquote romantic relationship of the series, mainly because I just love the way the two play off each other at their best. But the short version is that the show placed way too much emphasis on Phineas being in the wrong about not noticing Isabella, while not really calling Isabella out enough for having unreasonable expectations and not just being a fucking coward. Oh, but it's okay, because Act Your Age, the episode where they actually get together, will explore exactly none of this. Because why the fuck would we ever do that? It's amusing, too, because even though Phineas and Ferb is not a character development show, you know, outside from Candace and Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and maybe Vanessa, there are a handful of episodes that give certain characters specific focus, where we get to show off some of their personality traits, moralities. It's certainly not very deep, but it is entertaining. In terms of this part of the show, I think my favorite episode from Season 2 is actually the Bully Code. After Baljeet saves Buford from choking to death, he becomes Baljeet's eternal slave. And by eternal, I mean for like 6 hours or whatever, because none of these episodes are ever allowed to take place over the course of more than one day. It's in the Bible or something. I forget how hilarious the Buford and Baljeet stuff actually is. The Doof Perry stuff is always hilarious, and there's actually a cute subplot with Candace, who's trying to get to Jeremy's phone in order to delete some embarrassing selfies of herself that she took. I didn't mention this earlier in the Candace-Jeremy part because I actually keep forgetting that this subplot is in this episode. It's perfectly fine and I enjoy it. I just forget it's here because the Buford-Baljeet stuff is hilarious. Irving is introduced into the cast this season, and he gets a couple of episodes focused on him. One is his debut episode, Hide and Seek. Another is Not Phineas and Ferb, which honestly kind of sucks. But then his older brother Albert takes the spotlight in the episode Doof's Side of the Moon, where he teams up with Candace to try to bust Phineas and Ferb and gets roped into their everlasting shenanigans. The Fireside Girls get a little more spotlight this season. Aside from Bubble Boys and Isabella and the Temple of Sap, there's At the Car Wash, where with Phineas and Ferb's help, they try to raise money to save a I guess endangered mole or whatever. There's Fireside Girl Jamboree, where they assist Candace in her misguided attempt to earn 50 patches in one day in order to earn some concert tickets. Because apparently just being a guest of a Fireside Girl simply wasn't sufficient for her.
She's allowed to bring guests, you know.
That's what I kept trying to tell you, Candace. But you were so insistent on becoming a Fireside Girl. Maybe you can start working on your good listener patch next.
No. He's got a point.
See, this is actually funny because it becomes a primary reference point for a future Season 2 episode, We Call It Maze. While Isabella is mentoring a young Fireside Girl in training, Candace uses this accomplishment of hers, and I'm using the word accomplishment very loosely, to win the respect of this little girl before having to reveal later on that her 50-patch accomplishment was a crock. Let this be a lesson to you, Candace. Isabella plays for keeps. Well, except when it comes to Phineas, because in that regard, she's a fucking coward. Aside from the episodes that specifically revolve around Jeremy, Candace does have her fair share of focus episodes herself, but there are a select few that I really want to spotlight on account of them being the absolute worst of the series. The first is the episode Thaddeus and Thor. Say, did you guys know that the show was originally conceived and pitched in the 90s? Before Dan and Swampy adopted their "this show must not focus on meanness or jerkiness" mantra, have you ever wondered what Phineas and Ferb might be like if they were allowed to actually be jerks? Well, congratulations, this episode is for you. Thaddeus and Thor are arrogant little shits. I get that that's the point of the episode. That doesn't mean I have to enjoy watching it. And rewatching the show for this retrospective, this is one of the few episodes that Candace is prominently a part of that I actively dislike her in. There was something about the way she pushed the boys into building that fort just to show it off, that really got on my nerves. I understand that it's intentional that the episode is actively going against Phineas and Ferb's mantra for doing the things that they do.
Candace, we don't do this to compete. We do it for fun.
And for the ladies.
Except aside from this one little scene here, this plot point actually doesn't go anywhere. She just demands that they do it. And then she has the nerve to get pissed off at them before they even have a chance to show off their full fort. I typically do not care for the Candace fails to bust the boys part of the show, but this is one of the very rare episodes where I feel it was 100% deserved. Sorry, Candace, karma's a bitch.
Fuck you.
Like, this episode really makes me appreciate that characters being a jerk is just really not a thing in the show. The closest we get to is Candace, but even then, her emotions are almost always justified. Almost. And this isn't even accounting for the Doofenshmirtz part of the story, which I'll get to later on when I talk about Doof. There's also Candace Gets Busted, which I think is honestly one of the worst episodes of the whole series, if not for that stupid frickin' ending. You can argue that she deserved her ending in Thaddeus and Thor for being so stuck up about the competition. You literally can't even argue that in Candace Gets Busted. She literally did nothing to deserve her fate. See, the show's internal logic is that because she's always trying to, quote, ruin the boys' fun, unquote, by trying to bust them, she deserves to look like an idiot at the end. There's at least a logic there, even if I don't 100% agree with it. But that doesn't even apply in this episode, because literally everything out of her control conspires against her. And as I discussed in the first part of this massive retrospective, this was the episode that really started to get me to reconsider my thoughts on Candace. And while I can't say she's one of my favorite characters, I no longer dislike her the way I heavily did early on. There's also a third episode I want to highlight that I don't really see get talked about all that much, and I honestly understand why, and that's The Secret of Success. I don't care for this episode either, and once again, it's for the ending. The boys build this all-terrain vehicle that they test out all day, and Candace attempts to use everything she learned at this weird seminar she attends with Stacy in order to help herself bust the boys. This includes driving in the all-terrain vehicle home to show their mother, who in turn decides to turn off every single brain cell she has, all three of them, and chastise Candace for driving without a license. You know, instead of actually listening to her daughter for once.
Or you might be legally retarded.
You do see why Linda's now my least favorite character, right?
Wow!
You know that apology Linda gave to Candace and She's the Mayor right before the time-space continuum vomited all over itself?
I'm sorry, Candace. Now I know all the crazy exploits you told me about were true.
Or the one she gave in Quantum Boogaloo?
Oh, honey, I am so sorry I didn't believe you.
You're not.
Yeah, you're not. Congratulations, Linda. It is my distinct honor to present you with the coveted Dumbest Motherfucker Award.
You did it. Good job. I can't believe it. I'm proud of you.
Like I said, Candace is certainly not one of my favorite characters on the show, and I will certainly acknowledge that more often than not, she does kind of bring the turmoil on herself with her behavior and mannerisms, but there were a few times throughout the series where the show just flat out fucked it up.
You done fucked it up!
Fortunately, it was far less of an issue in seasons 3 and 4, and we'll certainly get to that, and she did kind of get her redemption in Summer Belongs to You.
And Candace, so responsible. Not a single phone call.
Well, I didn't have international coverage. What? Never mind.
You do understand why Linda is my least favorite character now, right? Why don't we just move on? So I haven't really talked that much about the Alka side of things throughout this retrospective so far. Wasn't really on purpose, I just really love the kids, but the Alka stuff is always a hoot. So let me touch upon it now a little bit before I move on to talking about the longer episodes of the season. We do get the Alka side of this world explored a little bit more in Season 2. Not to an incredible degree, but I always appreciate the little nuances and details that they add. For example, the episode Swiss Family Phineas that gives Carl a little bit of the spotlight, which includes his own theme song.
Knows how to format, spell check and text edit. He's working this job just for college credit. He's Carl.
Remember that at one point Carl wasn't even a real character, and now he has his own kick-ass theme song. And on the subject, we have the episode Undercover Carl. Apparently Major Monogram decided to drink a whole gallon of stupid juice that day because he was convinced that Phineas and Ferb were out to destroy the tri-state area. So Carl, in an effort to help him pass his intern evaluation, is sent into the fray to investigate. All while Perry is sent on a literal wild goose chase to be distracted, and Doofenshmirtz accidentally intercepts Phineas and Ferb's big idea to use it for his own nefarious plans.
Situation neutralized.
Abort mission, I repeat, abort mission.
You ever wonder what it would have been like if these people had just decided not to listen to Monogram and started open firing on the house? If I wasn't morally against the use of artificial intelligence, maybe I would have dabbled into something to demonstrate what I think would have happened, but instead I'll just play this stock clip. I think that speaks for itself. Also, no, I didn't misspeak. Perry is sent out on a literal wild goose chase in search of a long-lost Auca agent that Monogram was convinced he would never find. But lo and behold, he did!
What the? Agent G on an extremely extended vacation. Loser!
Honestly, I just keep forgetting how funny and amazing this episode actually is. Oh, there's also I Was a Middle-Aged Robot. Lawrence accidentally falls into Perry's secret lair and gets trapped in this memory eraser thingamajig. Why the hell is that thing just sitting out here like that? Also, why does him losing his memories mean that he regresses back to being an infant? How does science work in the Phineas and Ferb world?
Mr. Fletcher got caught in the memory eraser.
Wait, googly moogly, Carl. This could bring down the entire organization.
How do you know that? I said, how do you know that?
So Carl and Monogram have to pull Perry from his super important mission of stopping Doofenshmirtz from... to be honest, I don't even know what the hell he was doing in this episode. He was just derping around, I think. So he can pilot a robot version of Lawrence, so he can help Candace win a trophy from this father-daughter competition, or whatever this is supposed to be. I don't think I would say this is the best Auca story of Season 2. I'd probably give that to Undercover Carl, but this is definitely the funniest.
Will you stop it? I am trying to have a conversation.
Once again, how does memory loss equal regression to infancy? Also, why does Carl just have a binky on hand, ready to use anytime he needs it? I feel like there's more to this story that we don't know about, and once again, we get a prime example of this organization's incredible incompetence.
Unfortunately, the operation manual is in Dutch.
But we were able to find a Dutch to French dictionary, and a French to English dictionary.
Is there a shortage of Dutch to English dictionaries, or are you guys just idiots? Oh wait, I just answered my own question. Season 2 is also where we get to see Doofenshmirtz's evil schemes start to... well, not necessarily decline in quality, but they become a little more petty. They've always been petty, even as far back as the first episode. But even in Season 1, there was definitely this aura of grandeur surrounding Doofenshmirtz and his evil ways. Even with the emotionally scarring backstories that made him sympathetic, you still took him seriously as a legitimate threat. It's not that you don't take him seriously as a threat in Season 2, but you can definitely tell that his evil schemes aren't quite as grand and evil as they were in Season 1. They start to become more smaller scale and petty. I doubt this is where the crew decided that they wanted to make Doofenshmirtz a good guy at the end of the show, but if that was the case, I could totally believe it. He's still just as hilarious as he's ever been. Whenever he's on screen, I just have a good hearty laugh at his antics. What I have a hard time deciding is exactly which episode has my favorite doof plot or interactions of the season. I can tell you what my least favorite is without any sort of hesitation whatsoever. It's Thaddeus and Thor, and it's not close, really. I feel like I'm the only one that actively hates every single facet of that episode, but I really do. I don't know why exactly, but there was something about the mother's love being decided by a game of kickball that really didn't sit right with me at all. I know it's supposed to be a joke. I am aware that it is supposed to be a punchline and exaggerated, but I hate it. Hell, the only genuinely good thing about this episode that I enjoyed was the idea of Doof being a master cup stacker being introduced. And then even that doesn't even last because Candace wipes the floor with him without even realizing it. But as far as favorite Doof appearance, it's so hard to choose for Season 2 because there are just so many that are incredible. And of course, Season 2 brings us more glorious Norm the Robot, which is always a good thing. Alright, let's start talking about the longer episodes of Season 2. I've already really talked about The Lake Known as Monster, which is a great episode, so let's move on to the next one, The Chronicles of Meep. Meep was a really fun addition to the show, and I really liked the world building that they tried to do with him and his alien comrades and enemies and whatnot. The idea of them only being able to speak human English through facial hair is pretty damn hilarious, even if it is really stupid. Not really sure why they went with a Candace parallel at the end, though.
I am an intergalactic security agent who roams the universe, busting people who do stuff they're not supposed to do.
You're like the me of the galaxy.
Not even almost close. Not even almost close.
See, Meep is actually going for hard-nosed criminals that threaten to fuck shit up in the galaxy. You're having the adolescence equivalent of a midlife crisis because your brothers are more talented than you.
Why you pulling me? I'm right.
Honestly, the absolute best part about this episode, and that's saying a lot considering this episode, is the end credits sequence. You see, it's a fake trailer for a potential sequel episode, or at least that's how it was originally conceived. But apparently the crew never considered the possibility that everyone would take it seriously as an actual trailer, so eventually they just decided, fuck it, let's make it into an actual episode. That episode became Meepless in Seattle, which premiered during Season 3. And I can't wait to get to that one, oh boy. On the subject of follow-up episodes, there's Phineas and Ferb's Quantum Boogaloo, another 22-minute episode that actually serves as a direct follow-up to a previous 22-minute episode, It's About Time. It's another example of what the world would be like if Candace ever succeeded in busting Phineas and Ferb. That being, a future ruled over by the tyrant Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Yes, as it turns out, if Candace ever succeeds in busting Phineas and Ferb, Perry will subsequently fail to defeat Dr. Doofenshmirtz, which means Doofenshmirtz takes over the entire world.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
This is another one that I definitely liked a lot more when I was younger and this was first coming out, but it's honestly still a great watch. It's so jarring and yet also so refreshing to see a mellowed out Candace, even if it is 20 years older. I don't know, maybe the Quaaludes finally just kicked in. And the role reversal of Candace's daughter being pissed off that her brothers don't do anything versus Candace being pissed off that her brothers do anything was pretty amusing in itself. Oh, and the episode also features a brief glimpse of Bowling for Soup, the band responsible for the theme song, where they play, you know, the song where the theme song is actually based on.
This could possibly be the best day ever.
If you've never actually listened to the full theme song, I feel really sorry for you. Oh, and let's not forget the absolute funniest scene in the entire episode.
Aunt Isabella. That means I'm gonna marry Phineas. Or Ferb.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
You fucking did that on purpose, didn't you, Candace? To be fair, though, Ferb probably would be a more suitable romantic partner for Isabella than Phineas.
Why you boring me? I'm right.
To be perfectly honest, when it came to the double-length episodes of Season 2, Phineas and Ferb fans fucking ate. No joke, there's literally an entire 22-minute Wizard of Oz spoof episode, and it seriously slaps. From the atmosphere to the musical numbers, even though Candace doesn't let Baljeet finish his, go fuck yourself, Candace. Doofenshmirtz as the Wicked Witch. This episode is just delightful, and I'm not even a huge fan of the Wizard of Oz myself. I even really like the message that the episode is trying to teach Candace, to actually pull the stick out of her ass and enjoy the summer while she still has it. As someone about to enter 30, I can tell you, being an adult really sucks. It's funny, when you're a kid, all you want is to be an adult, and then when you become an adult, all you want to do is go back to being a kid. Life really fucking blows, don't it? I think my only real issue with Wizard of Oz is that the lesson Candace tries to learn in the episode really doesn't stick. And it's not really the episode's fault. It's mainly the show's fault. And look, I get it. Candace is not going to stop trying to bust her brothers because that would really throw the formula for a loop. But at the same time, would it really? There are a select few episodes throughout the show's run where Candace doesn't try to bust the boys once, and those episodes really hold up pretty well. One of them is from this season, The Baljeetos, one of my favorite Season 2 episodes. I'm not saying it would have to stop entirely, that's silly, but if it happened every now and again, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and you really wouldn't notice. But otherwise, this lesson kind of feels a little unearned. But I don't hold that against this episode itself. It's still fantastic. There's also a very interesting 22-minute episode that comes in the middle of this season. It's called Phineas and Ferb's Musical Cliptastic Countdown. As the name would suggest, the episode served as a countdown for the top 10 most popular Phineas and Ferb songs from Season 1, as actually voted on by fans. The episode was hosted in-universe by Major Monogram and Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. It's such a strange, silly, and yet hilarious setup. The episode is best remembered for two moments. First, this.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.
What's happening here?
And two, the premiere of the full version of Gitchy Gitchy Goo.
My baby's got her own way of talking. Whenever she says something sweet.
Yeah, this part was pretty damn cool. Although I have to point out some hilariously ironic lyrics.
You know it may sound confusing. Sometimes I wish you'd give it to me straight.
You so damn stupid.
What's funny to me is how this song ended up being very integral to the plot of the episode. It's literally the antidote to Doofenshmirtz's evil scheme that would have resulted in him mind-controlling everyone in the audience to Well, honestly, what the hell did Doofenshmirtz think he would accomplish mind-controlling these painfully average simpletons? Like, that literally doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't have to! I've got a monster truck!
Say, do you remember the pilot episode, Rollercoaster? Did you also remember that the episode didn't have a single musical number in it? Don't feel bad if you didn't. I didn't remember myself. Music is so paramount to the show's identity that it blows my mind that there was ever an episode that didn't have a song in it. But don't worry, Season 2 looks to correct that fatal mistake with Rollercoaster, the musical. This episode not only has musical numbers, but it goes the extra mile and gives a musical number for pretty much every single catchphrase that's paramount to Phineas and Ferb's formula. It's pretty impressive in a way. And also a little distracting. Yeah, I actually don't like this episode quite as much as the original. It's not a bad episode, but the thing is the lack of musical numbers really didn't bring down the original episode. The story works without them just fine. All of the songs in this episode, including Carpe Diem at the end, are great songs, but at no point did I feel like they improved the experience, really. It's still a fun ride, and it's not like I'm gonna skip this episode like I would a couple of others in Season 2, but if I had to choose, I say I still like the original episode better. I will say I find it really funny just how this episode is actually contextualized. Like, they're not retelling the story of the original episode just with musical numbers. No, they're literally just doing another roller coaster, only this time with songs. Doof is even repeating his evil scheme from the very first episode in this episode, again, for some reason. Honestly, I find the fact that that's so dumb to be more entertaining than the episode itself, and that is still saying something. Then we also have Phineas and Ferb Hawaiian Vacation, which technically is not a 22-minute episode. Or rather, it's two 11-minute episodes that both happen to take place in Hawaii. Part 1 focuses on Candace trying to distance herself from the busting thing, at least temporarily, so she can actually relax for once in her fucking life. In this episode, the busting assignment goes to the hotel manager, who is voiced by Phil Lewis, aka Mr. Mosby from the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody franchise. Oh shit, I dated myself again. Part 2 focuses on the boys trying to help Candace get rid of what she thinks is a bad luck charm, because she keeps experiencing the worst day of her life, which is pretty much any day of her life except this one happens to be in Hawaii. Oh, but don't worry, that trinket wasn't going to bring her bad luck, it was going to bring her a free dessert. Oh yeah, and Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Perry are in these episodes as well. In Part 1 he tries to reinvent Darwinism, and in Part 2 he reenacts Gilligan's Island, and then his escape plans are all thwarted by a whale. Good stuff. Oh, and Season 2 also has a first for the show, its first holiday special. Yes, the eternally summer-bound series finally ventures out to other seasons of the year, with the oddly timed 33-minute episode, Phineas and Ferb Christmas Vacation. The boys try to make a gigantic thank you spectacle for Santa for all of his Christmas generosity. But thanks to Dr. Doofenshmirtz apparently relapsing on evil, yeah, I'll get to that when I talk about Season 4, the literal town of Danville is deemed naughty and thus skipped over by Santa on his route, which opens the door for the kids to spread some Christmas cheer and, ironically or maybe not ironically, a chance for Santa Claus to grant Phineas's Christmas wish.
Dear Santa, you are one of my biggest heroes. All I want for Christmas this year is a chance to be like you.
Well, he's got the generosity part down at least. Also, I should mention that this is the third different character that Clancy Brown has voiced throughout the show's run. Either he really loves this show, or someone has blackmail on someone. What can I say about this episode? It's beautiful. It's a classic. In some parts of the country, this episode actually got a national ABC broadcast during the year that it premiered. Do you know how impressive that is? Oh, before I forget, I should also point out, this episode technically premiered twice. Let me explain. See, the episode originally premiered in 2009, but in 2010, they did a special extended episode premiere. That's right, they premiered this special a second time, but this time with extra footage to pad out the length. And all of this extra footage amounted to exactly one new song.
What does he want? DVD or some video games? What does he want? Maybe one of those new digital frames. What does he want?
Now don't get me wrong, the song is good, it's a bop even, but when you tease extended edition, I tend to think more than just 2 or 3 extra minutes of footage. I feel like a Karen who's entitled to a refund about this, or at least a discount. This is everything that I love about Christmas. Whimsical optimism, the desire to spread joy and goodwill, the need for older teenagers to mock young kids for believing in a folk hero. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Candace. You still love Ducky Momo. You don't get to say anything. The two little elves, Cluent and Blaine, the old fudge bucket and the optimist. Personally, I felt like the arc they tried to give Cluent, the old cynic that has to rediscover their love of the holiday, was a little bit undercooked, to be perfectly honest. I didn't fully buy into the emotional growth that they were clearly trying to sell with him, but he was still an amusing presence, and it's not something that kills the episode for me in any capacity. Candace mocking the kids for believing in Santa felt a little uncalled for, and especially hypocritical given what we know in a later episode that I'm about to get to, especially contextualized with the brief argument/separation she had from Jeremy in this episode, but I think the ending almost made up for it. Almost. Huge missed opportunity in hindsight to do a role reversal of the Candace fails to bust the boys plotline. They could have had the kids try to get Candace to meet Santa Claus and him not be there at the last second. It was there on a silver platter and they didn't take it. I was so upset. The Doofenshmirtz part, as always, is absolutely hilarious. As it turns out, of all the things that he's established to hate throughout the series, Christmas is not one of them.
All these other holidays, I can admit that I am bored, but I really don't hate Christmas.
The carolers that end up getting on Doof's last nerve are absolutely delightful. You know, except this motherfucker.
Come on, guys. Let's do But It's Christmas, Becky.
You gotta get over me, Josh.
Just get a restraining order at this point, seriously. Actually, there's really only one part of this episode that I actively dislike, and it's this part right here. It's in the middle of the episode, right as the letters to Santa are being delivered back to the kids. Candace, in her limited teenage wisdom, thinks she knows why it happened.
What's different this year than last year? Oh, I know! You went out and got everyone in Danville involved in one of your off-the-cuff harebrained schemes. But you know, sometimes we do naughty things without ever having any idea they're naughty. Sometimes we do an entire summer's worth of them.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you forever. Fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves. You fucks.
Yeah, if there was ever a scene that justified Candace getting drop-kicked, it would be this one. It's also funny because this unintentionally implies that the summer the show takes place in is the first summer where Phineas and Ferb are doing all of this, which would be later retconned by Act Your Age, which implied that Phineas and Ferb had been doing this for literally years.
Great continuity!
Look, I've softened on Candace significantly over the years, but this was the scene that required her words being thrown back in her face, and it just didn't happen. Like, it's never really brought up again that Candace was just flat out wrong about the reason Danville was naughty. To be fair, they were never going to find out that it was Doofenshmirtz anyway. That would have completely fucked up the whole formula, except not really, I'll explain in Season 4. But she could have, you know, apologized? You know, in retrospect, Phineas and Ferb really did let her get away with a lot of unjustified shit towards them. Well, actually, I have to correct myself a little bit. This Candace scene is the only one that pisses me off, but there is another scene that does confuse me. I just have one question. Who the fuck is this girl?
It's Wendy Sticklehopper's present. She asked for a really big hat. Isn't that pretty girl from the math team?
What math team? Wasn't this a show about summer vacation? And it's established that apparently Baljeet has a crush on this girl or something. By the way, spoilers! We never see this girl again after this episode, nor is she ever mentioned. It's just so random and pointless, but I can't even be mad about it. You know, it's fun for me to nitpick and mock all of these little transgressions. But in terms of overall quality, this episode is just wonderful. Perfectly captures everything that the Christmas holiday is supposed to be about. Spreading joy, selfless generosity, and capitalism. Oh, and I almost forgot the really fun episode, Nerds of a Feather. This episode is basically animated San Diego Comic-Con. Phineas and Ferb want to meet one of their creative heroes in Kevin Smith, Clive Addison, played by Kevin Smith, but end up having to break up a culture war between basically Star Trek and Star Wars. Meanwhile, Candace has to sneak around the con while trying to hide her obsession with this preschool toy named Ducky Momo, while Doofenshmirtz captures Seth MacFarlane and pitches to him an animated series featuring him and Perry the Platypus. And honestly, his concept for a spin-off is way better than what the Alka Files turned out to be.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
I myself am not as deep into this quote-unquote geek culture as others would be, nor do I feel an obsessive need to get into culture wars between over whether Star Trek is better than Star Wars. I literally don't give a single fuck about any of that. But this episode so perfectly captures those attitudes and why they're just so incredibly dumb. Who gives a shit if Star Wars is better than Star Trek? Like what you like and share in what you like with others, even if what you like is aimed at a younger target audience than you. Of course, Phineas and Ferb saving the day using special effects makes perfect sense considering these two are literally prodigies at everything they do. Of course, that doesn't mean anyone learned anything in the end. Fandoms are still stupid. You know what's not stupid, though? Selling out, apparently.
Can we give the platypus a girlfriend?
What? Never! Oh, suddenly you know my characters better than me?
11 minutes later.
Ah, he was right. This is better. I should have sold out.
It's honestly hilarious just how well this joke has aged. So here's something I didn't expect myself to say, but my favorite subplot from this episode was the Candace one.
What?
I can really relate to the idea of holding on to childhood toys, even long after you were supposed to have grown out of them or whatever. The fear of being made fun of by insecure people that themselves don't have anything from their past that they hold on to is incredibly raw. And kids can be needlessly cruel and stupid about it. Like, congratulations, she's at least partly responsible for saving your asses from being stomped on, and you still mock her. This shit is why fandoms get a bad rep, and it's not undeserved. And hell, even if she wasn't a part of the main plot at all, just her moment with Susie at the very end of her story made her subplot totally worth it. I almost kind of wish they did more with Susie in this episode. They could have done a nice, parallel between her and Candace with Ducky Momo. After all, suddenly Susie showed that they developed some sort of pseudo-bond together. Why didn't they do more with it? And then, of course, there's the superhero homage episode of the season, The Beak. Phineas and Ferb inadvertently become superheroes, or rather, a superhero known as The Beak. Oh, I get it, it's because of the nose. How do you think Phineas sleeps at night? Like, that ginormous honker cannot be easy to sleep with. Doofenshmirtz takes charge of the tri-state area simply by saying he is the one in charge, and somehow that actually forces Roger out of office because everything about the show is stupid in the best way. And Candace, in her quest of the day to stop the boys, ends up becoming a sidekick to a villain character that I will be referring to as Wet Turd. No, that's not his actual name. This is his actual name. But Wet Turd is funnier to me, so I'm gonna be doing that. Also, it's my video, fuck you. So anyway, it's Wet Turd's arrival in Danville that forces Roger's hand, and he appoints Doofenshmirtz as the temporary mayor, because I guess he can apparently do that, just so he can be the fall guy to the citizens, because Roger is a feckless, spineless fuck. And Doofenshmirtz's interactions in this new setting, even just temporary, are some of the funniest bits in the entire season. I'm dead serious. Oh, and also on the side, Isabella is going for a Fireside Girls patch on investigative reporting, and ends up covering the developing stories between the Beak and Wet Turd. Because they go the route of Phineas refusing to tell Isabella of their secret identity as the Beak, Isabella actually legitimately starts to doubt her feelings for Phineas. Meanwhile, she actually legitimately starts falling in love with this Beak guy, not realizing that it's Phineas controlling the top half because Isabella is kind of an idiot. Don't make me play the clip again, please. Following up on my point of not being into geek culture all that much, superhero stuff is really not my forte. I mean, Spider-Man is literally it, if I'm being honest. So an episode like this really wouldn't fill me up the same way it would fill up others that really are into superhero stuff. With that said, I still enjoy this episode overall. This is actually a rare time where I can feel legitimate tension between Isabella and Phineas. Yes, he lies to her throughout the episode, but you at least understand why. Yes, Isabella was wrong to doubt Phineas's motivations, but you at least understand why she did. Yes, Doofenshmirtz was an idiot for mistaking a breath mint for an intercom, but it's literally the funniest shit of all time, so you give it a pass. And the brief dynamic that Candace and Stacy had as villain and henchman was honestly really damn funny. A lot funnier than it had any business being. And look, I get this episode was a homage. It was making fun of the standard superhero tropes. I know that I'm not supposed to take what happens in this episode super seriously and apply the tropes that happen in this episode to their respective characters going forward. With that said, however, how the hell did it never occur to Isabella that Phineas and Ferb might be the ones behind this sudden Beak superhero guy? You know damn well the crazy shit they do every single day. You've been friends with them how long at this point?
Phineas is the Beak? Hey, you just earned your derp patch.
He's out of line, but he's right.
Wet Turd is voiced by Ben Stiller, and he does a fantastic job of treading that line between being a legitimate threat and being a pathetic loser. You know, kind of like Doofenshmirtz. Though it's not as good as Doofenshmirtz, because Doofenshmirtz is just so much funnier. And of course, it was nice to see Isabella and Phineas make amends at the end of the episode.
Phineas, I'm sorry I doubted you.
No, you're not.
I should have known you were the Beak all along.
Once again, how did you not? How much stupid juice did you consume before the day began?
I'm sorry I couldn't tell you.
Again, no you're not. And of course, Ferb gets the shaft because he was working the bottom half of the Beak. Man, what did he do to deserve that? And that appropriately brings us to the final extended episode of the season, and the first 44-minute episode of the series, Phineas and Ferb, Summer Belongs to You. While I do consider this to be one of the weakest 44-minute episodes of the series, it's mainly by default. It's more of a product of the show stepping up its game with the extended episodes, minus the Alka Files, and it really went to show just how far the show came. But Summer Belongs to You was something special at the time. See, the story is about the kids trying to follow the sun around the world and trying to make it back to their backyard before the sun sets, appropriately doing it on the summer solstice, the longest day of summer. The most unique thing about this episode in relation to the show is what it puts the characters in, a position of vulnerability. Part of the charm of the show is that Phineas and Ferb as characters are never supposed to change. The character growth is reserved specifically for characters around them, like Candace or Doofenshmirtz. Now, personally, I wish this wasn't really the case, because I think character growth for Phineas or Ferb could be incredibly interesting because of their personalities. And this episode provides a unique glimpse into what Phineas and Ferb would be like in situations where they might not succeed. Phineas straight up gives up on the island when they're about to be stranded, settling for watching the sunset with Isabella, which at that point was all that she wanted. Before a pep talk from her propels him to gain his confidence back and actually help get everyone back to Danville. Also, the episode guest stars Clay Aiken and Shaka Khan, and that's apparently a good thing. There is one aspect that I need to call foul on, because I genuinely think this was a missed opportunity. There's a scene in the middle of the episode where Vanessa is venting to Ferb about her dad and her frustrations with him, and this is his response.
Well, sometimes if you love somebody, you have to meet them halfway.
Now, I presumed that this was intended to be a parallel to Isabella's frustrations with Phineas. You know, with him being justifiably focused on trying to fix the plane and get everyone home, except it doesn't really come through correctly to make the parallel work. Yes, Isabella finally has one of her 3 working brain cells turn on and have the pep talk with Phineas to get him motivated to help everyone off the island, but she comes to this conclusion independently of the parallel. Like, you would think that when she's crying like a little bitch to Ferb about Phineas, he would repeat the line and that would be what ultimately sparks Isabella's epiphany, but it doesn't, though. Now, it's possible I am misinterpreting the intention, but it feels like such an obvious slam dunk that was fumbled into 2 missed free throws. Also, it's fucking hilarious to me in hindsight that the extent of their relationship development is them sharing 2 hugs in this episode. A whole 2 fucking hugs! Wow, it's like an 8-course meal on a screen! I should also mention that the entire conflict was started by Buford, who kept claiming that it was completely impossible to travel around the world in a single day, and it ultimately led to this.
If you lose, you're gonna have to stand up in front of everyone and say that you are governed by the laws of physics, and summer's not whatever you want to make of it. And what's more, you gotta spend the rest of your summer doing nothing.
Bull fucking shit.
Am I the only one that was, like, legitimately not impressed with this plot development? Like, don't get me wrong, Bufort's not a saint, and honestly, he can absolutely work in certain antagonistic situations. But this feels like something that should have happened in Season 1, when he was still debatably a bully. Although, to be perfectly fair, I can totally buy him as a flat earth conspiracy theorist. I don't know, the bet just felt incredibly unnecessary. Although, to be fair, again, without that bet, we wouldn't have gotten by far the best moment of the entire season.
Phineas, I'm not gonna get on a silly little tricycle.
Candace, we're in a hurry. Just get on the trike and
There's
we'll go.
no way I'm
Get on
gonna...
the trike!
You had that coming, Candace. Just take your L. And of course, the songs. They're all fantastic in this episode, but special props go to Summer Belongs to You at the end. It was quintessential Phineas and Ferb for the longest time, and was in fact one of my all-time favorite songs, until Us Against the Universe came around. That one's just so much better, fight me. Season 2 definitely felt like the show taking a step up from what it did in Season 1. Even if not every single episode was a huge hit, for instance, aside from the ones I mentioned that I really hated this season, there were some episodes that I didn't hate but really weren't so much of a fan of, like Not Phineas and Ferb, Candace's Big Day, Ladies and Gentlemen Meet Max Mona. Oh, that's right, I forgot to talk about that. So remember in Season 1 when it was revealed that Linda was actually a one-hit wonder pop star in her 20s, I think? Yeah, they actually decided to follow up on that with an entire episode dedicated to exploring that. I do appreciate that they wanted to actually follow up on a previously established plot point, even if it really isn't one of my personal favorite episodes. The show does this quite a few times, actually. I really do appreciate it. Even if not every single episode was a mammoth home run, the entire package as a whole was a great time. Overall, the show really hadn't lost any steps at all, and it would look to take even bigger leaps forward come Season 3 time, which we'll talk about next time.